Think back on your favorite racing games from the last couple of decades, and I bet that a fair few of them follow the same general formula. Start out with a small sum of money, purchase a slow starter car on that budget, and then work your way up to bigger and better things, earning cash and spending it on upgrades as you go, all while slowly building up a collection of cars that is uniquely yours. Most racing games follow this basic formula to some degree, and that can largely be traced back to Gran Turismo. That's oversimplifying things a bit, but Polyphony's contribution to the history of the racing game is truly something special. A driving experience so personal and granular that nothing else could even come close. As a rule, I try only to review games when I feel I have something new to contribute to the discussion. There are more than a few topics that I've considered covering before deciding that everything I have to say has already been said. This has ruled out a few games in the past, and in my head I've always thought that Gran Turismo would fall into that category. The first game is the best-selling game on the original PlayStation with over 10 million sales, and the sequel trails just behind. Yet, there's surprisingly little talk about the franchise's early years. This series has a rich history to unpack, and rather than rush through over 2 decades worth of innovation, I'm going to give each and every era its due, starting right here at the beginning. The moment that really sold me on Gran Turismo 1 came during a license test, lapping Route 11 in a Dodge Viper. Despite running at a whopping 320x240 resolution, on a console with so little memory that it couldn't store the audio making up this sentence, Polyphony took the time to model the Viper's unique third brake light embedded in its badge. Put simply, Polyphony's attention to detail is unmatched for a game of this scale. Despite Gran Turismo's subtitle, it's so much more than a driving simulator. It's a car simulator. Every step of owning an automobile is represented here in some way. You go to a brand's dealership to buy their cars. Current offerings are sold in the new showroom, while used lots constantly cycle stock of older models. Every car has unique stats, modification parts, tuning setups, wiki pages, detailed badging, and more. Brands will even give you more money for your used wheels if you sell them at the dealership you bought them from. Gran Turismo is clearly a love letter not to just racing and motorsports, but to cars in general. And this is to say nothing of the gameplay. Don't worry, we'll get to that. But first, we need to talk about Kazunori Yamauchi. Kaz is well known today, both for his work on Gran Turismo and his recent endeavors in real-world motorsports. But before Gran Turismo, he hadn't done much to grab public attention. He did good work, helping to design the PlayStation hardware, but Kaz was not a big name in the industry like he is today. At the time, the studio we now know as Polyphony Digital was called Poly's Entertainment, though calling them a studio at the time might have been a bit generous. Poly's was only a small team within the larger Sony Computer Entertainment umbrella. Their first projects were a pair of cartoonish racing games called Toon Grand Prix. Despite the colorful visuals and playful theme, Yamauchi's ambitions to make a simulator shone through. Kaz said that he wanted to strike the balance between challenging, realistic handling and fun, exhilarating gameplay, something that would later influence his efforts of the Gran Turismo franchise. Toon GP did not sell well, because, look at it. This was never going to do big numbers. But behind the scenes, Kaz was cooking up something much bigger. Gran Turismo would not see release until 1997, just over 3 years after the PlayStation hit Japanese storefronts. Most games of this era were developed in rather short time frames. Games had less content and were less complex than the 9-figure beasts we've become accustomed to over the last few generations. So it might come as a surprise that Gran Turismo started development not in 1996 after the release of Toon GP2, but all the way back in 1992, years before the PlayStation was even available. Rarely did a game ever take this long to develop in the 1990s, even titles this groundbreaking and influential. Gran Turismo's long development cycles have become something of a running joke in the community, and while there have been exceptions here and there, it's pretty much always been the case. But with this much attention to detail, it's really no wonder, especially when taking into account the size of the team behind the game. Kaz has famously said that he spent as little as 4 days a year at home during the production of the original Gran Turismo, and that he had as few as 7 team members working on the project at any given time. With 2 other games in production before Gran Turismo's launch, one has to give credit to Kaz and the team. This was a passion project, through and through. Gran Turismo is absolutely stunning on a technical level. This has to be among the best looking games on the PlayStation. And while I did play on a PS2 for this review, I think it's just as impressive that this all came without any slowdown and at a decent frame rate. There's pop-in, but I don't recall any specific instances where I couldn't see where I was supposed to be going. With simulation of the driven wheels, in-depth tuning, and even tire wear in endurance races, this game's feature set is mind-blowing for the time. In a sea of late 90s racing games, Gran Turismo stands out for so many reasons. Gorgeous graphics, refined controls, and nearly 200 licensed cars, ranging from compact K cars and hatchbacks to Grand Tours and Le Mans racers, with each and every road-going model having a racing modification available. The sheer size of this car list, and how players interact with it through the course of the game, is one of Gran Turismo's crowning innovations. Pretty much every racing sim and sim light made since has followed Polyphony's lead. Every car handles differently, and players will build up a diverse collection over the course of the game. Even within the genre of sim light racing, Gran Turismo's handling model is unique. More than anyone else, Polyphony handsomely rewards adhering to the racing line, and harshly punishes sloppy driving. Cars understeer hard, and you best brake early and brake often. These traits aren't unique to Gran Turismo, but compared to something like Sega GT, where the handling of almost every vehicle is perplexingly inconsistent and sloppy, Gran Turismo's vehicles respond to your actions in kind. If you can't stop in time for a corner, it's on you. Mess up your line and end up in the grass, and it's your fault. Gran Turismo will make you better at racing games, because to win, you will need to learn how to do so. This becomes increasingly true as the franchise goes on. But this isn't to say that beginners can't have fun. I'd argue that all of the mainline games are generally very good at easing the player into the learning curve. All of them, except for this one. I should clarify that I am not a newcomer to this franchise. I might have been late to the party, starting with Gran Turismo 5 in 2012, but I've spent a good amount of time with every full game in the series. Even still, it's been a while since I've properly dove into one of these, and that unique handling model has the unfortunate side effect of being easy to lose your grip on over time, especially when your taste leans towards the arcade side of things. I knew coming back to Gran Turismo was going to take some adjustment, but I wasn't ready for how brutal the first game can be to new players. Even after going through the B&A license tests, I found myself struggling to win anything past the Sunday Cup. No matter what I did, the AI were faster, my qualifying times were way off the pace, and I couldn't seem to course any vehicle around the track with even a hint of urgency. My rusty skills certainly did not help matters, but more than that, I just couldn't seem to get my tires to grip. Until I dropped some cash on a set of racing slicks and immediately found myself decimating opponents, qualifying on pole, and improving my best lap times by over 10 seconds on my first try. So it was smooth sailing then? Not quite, because just as I started to have fun, I ran out of events and needed the IA license. And yeesh. I'm going through and golding GT3's license test without too much difficulty right now, but these just feel absurd. Race tires absolutely break early game events, but the difficulty picks right back up soon thereafter. In events with race cars or even tuned street cars, the AI pull off some seriously improbable shit. And God forbid an event requires you to drive an unmodified car on stock tires. It's like driving on a frozen lake. I know what you're thinking. You're just bad at the game. And at first, I was right there with you. I thought I was just rusty. And it doesn't help that it's become a running joke that I'm actually quite bad at racing games for someone who's made a channel out of reviewing them. But to test my theory, I popped in Gran Turismo 3 and my god, it was like night and day. That game is not exactly easy either, but it felt like I had something resembling a fair chance. Getting gold on 2 whole categories of license tests in GT3 took me less time than just passing the IA test in Gran Turismo 1. I played some Gran Turismo 2 next with similar results. GT2's handling is so much grippier, and the game is just better for it. Almost none of GT1's difficulty quirks are in GT2. Tracks are wider, collisions with AI are more fair, and grazing a curb does not send you soaring through the air like the Dukes of Hazzard. All of that, plus nearly 4 times as many cars, far more content, and visuals even more impressive than the first games. So, is that it? Is Gran Turismo 1 just a relic? A curiosity completely obsoleted by its sequel? Yeah, kinda. Unless you've exhausted every bit of content in the other mainline Gran Turismo games, plus all of the odds, ends, and prologues, I don't see much reason for most to go back to this one over any other game in the franchise. But, if I'm allowed to be sappy, it's beautiful to see where the series got its start. The Gran Turismo series has sold 85 million copies to date, had just shy of 1,200 cars on disc by GT6, and is responsible for turning generations of kids into car enthusiasts. All of that from about a dozen people sleeping in an office and slaving away for 6 years to make their dream a reality. As mechanically frustrating as this game can be at times, it does a lot more right than I've let on. There's an arcade mode with more relaxed physics, and while it does feature a relatively limited slice of the game's content, it's more than enough to scratch any foreseeable itch to revisit the game. And even with that sparse selection of cars and tracks, arcade mode still offers a comparable value to the entirety of most other games of the time. Look, I understand that comparing these games directly is an apples to oranges scenario, but that's kind of the point. Polyphony essentially created their own subgenre within the greater racing sim category. Sega GT, Forza Motorsport, and even the Need for Speed Shift games all followed in Gran Turismo's footsteps, from licensed tests to the basic formula of starting in a beater and working your way up to purpose-built race cars. And while many of Gran Turismo's quirks and features changed throughout the years, the personality and identity that defined Game 1 are still present in Game 6 and beyond. The lounge music, the mouse pointer menus, the used car dealership, hell, even the sound effects. And above all else, that signature formula that defined how racers would be made for 2 decades and counting. Even with all of Polyphony's missteps, strange ventures, and weird decisions, this series has achieved a level of consistency and quality that I don't think any other franchise has ever matched. Gran Turismo was a smash hit, being one of only 2 PlayStation games to sell over 10 million copies. By the time GT made it to the States 6 months after its initial Japanese release, Sony recognized that Polyso had a real winner on their hands, and the team became the fully fledged developer we now know as Polyphony, receiving all of the funding that entails. The original Gran Turismo has problems, and certainly can't be recommended as a starting point for newcomers. Pretty much any game that follows will give you a better experience. But I don't want to undersell how special the original game was and still is, or how important it would prove to be for the industry as a whole. More importantly, this series is still the greatest love letter to cars and car racing to grace home consoles, even after its popularity has waned. Revisiting Gran Turismo 1 has not only reminded me of the humble beginnings, from which Polyphony Digital built one of the greatest franchises of all time, it's left me extremely excited to experience the rest of it. Thank you all so much for helping me achieve 20,000 subscribers. This is a really meaningful milestone for me, and I'm planning to celebrate with a behind-the-scenes special in the coming weeks. There will be a Q&A attached to that video, so if you've got any questions you'd like me to answer, drop them in a comment below and I'll check them out. And again, thank you all so much for making this happen. And a special thanks to my patrons who have donated their hard-earned money to make what I do possible. By name, Acquire86, Adam Wozniewski, Andre, Andrew Elmore, Ben M, Jesse Scales, Jesse's Cool Reviews, Kai M, Caitlin Bowers, Kelly Craven, Mini-Me, Mr. W, Rachel, Racing Game Archive, Ravage the Jaguar, Thibaut Renault, and Thunder THR. Patreon support is always appreciated but never expected. If you'd like to support me in that way, you can do so in the video description. Until next time, take care.